So, I want to talk about Jenny Nicholson's video, The Spectacular Failure of the Star Wars Hotel, because it sparked a lot of debate online. You might be saying, well, what's the news story here, Peter? And in some way, there isn't one, right? This is a video that was, released about 2 weeks ago. And you might be saying, Peter, are you just trying to ride the coattails of a popular video? To which I say, yes, I am. Because, again, I think it's really started a conversation that we're still kind of having. Like, even though it was only released, 2 weeks ago, it feels like it's, an essential part of, the canon, almost, of, YouTube videos in this, about topics like this, about theme parks. It feels like a new major addition to the YouTube theme park video canon, if you will. It feels like it's been now added to that. And it's not just me saying that, right? So, again, it's only been uploaded for just over 2 weeks. I think it was 17 days or something. It's already her third highest viewed video at about 6.9 million views, right? And it's incredible, not only the results that this video has had, but also considering it is over 4 hours long. It's about 245 minutes long. So it's not, you can't just say oh, well, it's a short video, people kind of click it, watch it, forget it, whatever. This is a meaty video. Now, I don't have access to Jenny Nicholson's analytics. I don't know what the average view duration is, but again, the YouTube algorithm wouldn't keep recommending it to people if people were just clicking on it for 30 seconds and then jumping away, right? But again, it sparked a lot of debate. So if you have not watched this video, I will kind of give you as brief as I can summarize a 4+ hour YouTube video. Kind of give you a brief context of kind of what's going on here in this situation and why I'm talking about it. So this all has to do with the quote-unquote Star Wars Hotel, which of course is its colloquial name. Really, in actuality, it was titled by Disney Star Wars Galactic Starcruiser. This was a themed hotel at Walt Disney World in Florida near Hollywood Studios. That was open from March 2022 to September of 2023, which I actually went in September of 2023 to Disney World. So I'm curious if it was closed before or after that, because I didn't hear anyone talking about it. But if you notice, it was only for 18 months, right? Which is a little concerning, right? Because it was meant to be this revolutionary immersive experience. It was basically a big LARP experiment. If you don't know what LARP is, live action role play. So it's not just a themed hotel the way it's you go to Wilderness Lodge and it's themed like a frontier outpost, right? That's just the aesthetics. The idea behind Galactic Starcruiser was that by basically going, you are essentially role playing as someone on an actual basically a space cruise in the Star Wars universe. So all the employees are in character, and you are diegetically experiencing this event, this storyline, right? And again, it was meant to be this revolutionary immersive experience. It was this 2-day experience. And I think because of how cool Disney thought it was going to be, and due to how rabid Disney World fans are, and how popular the Star Wars brand is, they, I don't want to use the word overcharged, but it was very, very, very expensive. I think Jenny said in her video that the 2-night experience for 2 people, for her and herself and I think it was her sister, or whoever it was with her, total, the entire experience was about $6,000. That's insane, right? That is unbelievable for ultimately an experience that is worse than just going to the Disney World parks. Like I said, I went to Disney World in September of 2023 with my fiancée Viviana, who's watching. Hi. I think the entire experience for us, including food, was maybe $6,000. And that was a 7-day trip, and we stayed at pretty decent hotels. We didn't just get we basically ate at restaurants the entire week. And it was about the same as this 2-day experience that, from how she describes it, seems like it kind of sucked, or rather, all the good parts were kind of overshadowed by all these elements that range from either being mediocre to just being objectively bad. And because of that underwhelming experience, Jenny's kind of conclusion was this is not worth the money even if you have it, right? For what you're getting for the price is just not worth it. it. So a little context about Jenny Nicholson. So if you don't know who she is, she's pictured here, obviously, if you didn't put 2 and 2 together. She's been a YouTuber for like over a decade. At her start, she kind of, from what I understand, kind of posted miscellaneous videos infrequently. It wasn't like she had a strong brand identity or anything like that. But her channel really picked up speed in like 2016 and like that kind of particular period of pop culture, which I feel was like, maybe I'm just biased because that's like when I was like a freshman in college going to film school, and I feel like I was actually finally surrounded by people who like lived and breathed film the way I did. But 2016 felt like a very important moment in pop culture because like Star Wars had just been rebooted, Marvel's Phase 3 was starting, Batman v Superman was a huge dud, all this kind of stuff, right? So her channel really picked up speed in that year as she started to cover more popular topics, including but not limited to Star Wars, right? And from my understanding, she's really scaled back her YouTube presence to focus more on Patreon. Or she'll still do videos, but until this new one, her last upload to YouTube was like November of 2022, right? So that's like almost 18 months. I think maybe it was more than 18 months. I think at this point it's more than a year and a half, basically. So obviously it was a lot of like like everyone kind of freaking out, like new Jenny Nicholson YouTube video just dropped, and everyone like rushing to go watch it. So the ascent, I've kind of talked about it a little, but it seems like the video's kind of general thesis was basically the hotel failed on 2 levels. Conception and then execution, right? Her argument is that the concept was doomed from the start, that ultimately you have like conflicting design principles of Disney Imagineering, which is oftentimes either very passive, very environmental, very static in the sense that, when you go to a Disney park, you're not meant to do something in this exact order. You're meant to kind of let it wash over you. And then on the flip side, Imagineering is also really good at very controlled ride experiences that are timed, and they have like very specific kind of parameters. And this was kind of the worst of both worlds, right? It was trying to kind of combine those into something that you can never reconcile those two things. Because those are ultimately 2 different design principles, right? Static, passive, environmental storytelling, and linear, timed, more or less, narrative experiences. And then but even then on top of it, it was also poor execution. So it wasn't even the best version of that flawed concept. She ended up doing, the reason why I decided, like I was debating doing this like for the past 2 weeks, and I was like, I don't know, maybe it's not really a story. But Rolling Stone interviewed Jenny, which I feel like is like a really big step up in her career. I don't know if she had been interviewed by a publication like that before. There's a couple excerpts here that kind of give more clarity on some of that thesis of hers, and also will tie into a point that I want to make down the road. So we have some quotes here from her in this interview. She said, quote, "As a YouTuber, I like to make content out of stuff, especially something like this, which it seemed like a lot of people would never get to see for themselves. So it seemed like a good opportunity to like document it and let people see what it was like. As with a lot of things I do, I thought it was going to be more of a neutral travelogue kind of thing, and then it turned into something totally different," end quote. So she talks about in this interview that, she was excited to use being a YouTuber as an excuse to splurge, right? Because again, it's like, that's like $6,000 is a lot of money. But she says here, quote, and she said this in the video too. She said, quote, "Because I knew it was going to be a video, in a sense, it felt lower pressure to know I would be getting the money back that I spent on it one way or the other," end quote. So, because she's able to monetize her videos, as I am not able to do because I do not have the watch hour or subscriber count for that. So please tell your friends to like and subscribe. She was basically like, whatever I put up, I'll probably with monetization make that money back. I'd be very curious to see how much money she's made now. I'm gonna do some actually calculations. So from what I've read, basically YouTuber on average, because this changes depending on a multitude of factors, but I think I read on average YouTubers who are able to monetize their content get about 1 to 2 pennies, closer to 2. I think it's like 1.8 cents for every ad that plays, right? So let's assume that 2 ads play at the beginning of the video, right? And theoretically there would be a lot more ad breaks during the video because it's such a long video. But let's just say, assuming that there's just 2 ad plays at the beginning. So that would be 0.018 times 2 times 6.9 million views. So she's probably made somewhere close to $250,000 off of this video. That is insane. And I should be so lucky, right? So her kind of argument was like, look, I will do this experience because like I can then make that money back. Kind of takes the pressure off of trying to see if I can financially make it work. She worked on the video on and off for about 2 years, she says. And then once the hotel closed, though, in September of 2023, which I see Viviana commented that the hotel officially closed September 30th, as its last voyage was September 28th to the 30th. Thank you, Viviana, for doing some fact-checking. Maybe we should have you be a fact-checker, Viviana. That basically, once the hotel closed, Jenny said in terms of making the video, she kind of shifted from a video that was kind of recommendation-based, like kind of like should you or should you not go. It then kind of became like this post-mortem, like what happened? Big question mark, right? She speaks to, she's not really sure why the video exploded, and she says here, quote, I think it might just be that Disney as a whole is so big right now that I feel like everyone has at least a cultural awareness of the brand. And there's a lot of discourse around Disney's rapid growth and how they own more and more things, and their perceived greed and the deep decline in quality of both movies, both the movies and the parks, end quote. And I think that's a really great point, Jenny, if you're watching this, which I doubt you are, that I think people just have an interest right now in Disney as a company because they've had a lot of missteps over the past like 5 years since the pandemic. And there is maybe a little bit of like schadenfreude of people kind of taking pleasure in Disney having not only a big failure, but a huge both high profile failure, but also probably a very expensive failure, right? And Jenny also notes that she feels like the Disney parks as a whole have declined in quality since the pandemic, saying, quote, the problems behind that, meaning the decline in quality, are kind of nuanced. A lot of it comes from how their CEOs have much shorter tenures now, so I think there's a lot more push towards short-term profits so the CEO can collect and then leave as opposed to focus on the longevity of the company and its reputation. So I think it comes down to more than just pure greed, or at least greed of the overall company, end quote. And that's a really good point, because again, yeah, like, if you only have CEOs who are in there for short periods of time, they aren't incentivized to think long-term of both the quality of the company and the reputation of the company. So, in a sense, this video kind of becomes a larger commentary on the Disney parks, Disney as a company, and if you want to go farther, which I will because I'm a very far lefty, if you will, a commentary on late-stage capitalism. This idea of companies really trying to put in the bare minimum to try and make as much money as possible. So the reaction to the video has been overwhelmingly positive from what I've seen, like seemingly universal praise. Like obviously social media is very algorithmic, so this is not necessarily, anecdotal evidence of what you saw on social media is not really a great way to judge something like this, but my Twitter feed was like dominated by people talking about this, people making memes about this. Like a big meme was about how when she was sat at dinner, like they designed the main restaurant dining area in such a way where some seats were like, there was a view of like live entertainment, but many seats were obstructed by like these giant pillars that it's unclear if they were structural or aesthetic, but in any case, it's like, you pay all this money, you expect to have unobstructed views of what's going on. So lots of memes about that. But Jenny claims that, people from Disney, or at least former Disney employees, have reached out to her, kind of echoing the concerns that she brought up and talked about how they were overworked and underpaid oftentimes, especially, like a lot of the workforce at the Star Wars Hotel were like part of the Disney College Program, which if you don't know what that's all about, it's basically Disney's way to essentially get slave labor off of goodwill. They do get paid, but essentially it's an opportunity for college students to like spend a semester or like a summer working for Disney. As part of like their education process, and I think they still go like to classes and stuff, but it's basically a way to get like minimum wage, like Florida, and I'm sure they do it in the other parks as well, but I just know about it for Florida, like Florida minimum wage workers, and I believe their housing is deducted from their pay, so it's even less than minimum wage. But because they're such strong Disney fans, they'll eat shit and like it, right? So there was a concern. And she makes a big point in the video that, none of her issues were with, like, the regular cast members, which, if you don't know, that's just what Disney calls, like, their employees. It doesn't necessarily mean people who are, like, performing or, like, are actors. I think, if anything, those would be called, like, the character performers, or I don't know what the terminology would be. But she makes a point, like, all the cast members at the Star Wars Hotel went above and beyond to just hospitality, good energy, good vibes, as helpful as they could be, right? So it seems like a lot of employees, reached out and kind of echoed those concerns that she brought up. And she also says that former Imagineers reached out. So again, if you don't know what Imagineers are, essentially it's Disney corporate speak for, like, their creative engineering department that Walt Disney formed. The idea of, like, they're the ones, like, kind of coming up with, like, the ideas for the parks, or how to, like, implement ideas for the parks. And, like I said, she got former Imagineers reached out to her. A lot of them seeming to be disillusioned, and many saying, in response to her video, like, quote unquote, this is why I left the company, because of, like, attitudes like this, like, of, like, the corporate greed and laziness and things like that. And we have a quote from Jenny here saying, quote, I've kind of gotten the impression that there's a much faster turnover of Imagineers than there used to be. People think of the classic ones that were there when Walt Disney was working at the company, like Raleigh Crump and Tony Baxter, and all the ones that are like, kind of legendary to theme park fans now. That kind of career Imagineer doesn't really exist anymore. I heard a lot of them work for like 3 years on average, and then they either get laid off or they leave for better paying projects. And I think that probably makes a difference in quality too, end quote. And that's a great point. It's like we were saying before, if you don't have institutional longevity of people working at your organization, they're not going to be incentivized to think long term, because either they don't care enough because you don't pay them enough, or you're going to fire them, so they're like, why am I going to get invested in something that my friend got laid off last year for, right? So it seems like the reaction to the video has been seemingly universal in terms of its praise, but there has been, I wouldn't call it backlash, but there have been people, saying, disagreeing with her, right? There is that vocal minority of fans that disagree. I don't want to cast broad strokes, or paint broad strokes, so to speak, and if you're one of these fans that I'm about to describe, I don't mean you any offense. But I'm not going to hold back what I'm going to say. And Jenny kind of makes this point as well, and I also thought this as well. And then she said, I was like, okay, I'm glad we're on the same page. A lot of people defending things like this are blind fans, whether it be blind Disney fans or blind Star Wars fans, who just spent way too much money on this thing, and they don't want to admit that they wasted their money or their time, right? It's like the sunk cost fallacy. You're more likely to double down on a decision like that because it's so costly, right? And she also calls on her video, like, the theme park influencer, and, like, I'm gonna call it, like, the theme park influencer industrial complex, right? Like, these YouTubers and Instagram users and social people on social media whose whole brand is being someone who goes to theme parks a lot, particularly Disney theme parks, and the allure, the business model, essentially, that people want to live vicariously through them. So it's important that these influencers stay on good terms with corporations like Disney, so they get invited to do experiences. So, like, a lot of theme park influencers got to do, the Starcruiser experience early. And from what we understand, some of those experiences were not even full experiences. It was more like they would do like a little bit, and then someone would explain. So at this point, you would get to do this, blah, 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 blah. So then the influencers would just be like, then you get to do this, and isn't that incredible? So there's definitely like that. There's a financial incentive for those people, right? But again, then there are those cast members, those people who work at Disney who are, for lack of a better word, are just red-pilled, right? They are just, again, maybe Disney college program kids, maybe they're just lifelong employees. They are just so deep in the Disney sphere that, it's almost reflexive to defend, this $185 billion corporation from attacks, right? And Jenny said that people reached out to her and said things like, quote, this was my favorite job I've ever done. This video is mean. Why are you besmirching this thing I loved working on so much, end quote. And it even escalated to a Screen Rant article by Molly Brazel, titled, I worked at the Galactic Starcruiser, and I can tell you what everyone's getting wrong about the quote-unquote Star Wars hotel. And it basically, the article basically hit all of the points that Jenny predicted. So near the end of the video, she's basically like, I'm sure people are going to say this, and this. In this article, almost as if it's parody, literally hit almost all of those points, especially the idea that you never call it the Star Wars Hotel, and that's why in that article title it's like the Star Wars Hotel, because Disney like wants things to be like very corporate and very like synergized and SEO friendly. So she's like, oftentimes when you watch these theme park influencers that are seemingly like it's organic feedback and like their own original thoughts, they're always saying like like when I got to do Star Wars Galactic Starcruiser, and never just the Star Wars Hotel, which is like what everyone would call it. So I'm just gonna read you like this is like 4 or 5 of these, just the title of the subsections of the Screen Rant article. So, and again, it kind of hits all of Jenny's points. The Star Wars Galactic Starcruiser was the first of its kind. The Starcruiser was so much more than a hotel. The price was high, but so were a majority of the reviews, which I don't know if that's quite true. 1 year after its closure, only the crew is hurt by negative reviews. So really, it's your fault, Jenny Nicholson, not Disney's for this. And then 5, the Starcruiser still changed many people's lives. Did it? It changed people's lives. I mean, it changed your bank account if you went and you spent, $3,000, $4,000. And I mean, there's no evidence for this, but perhaps Disney kind of deployed their PR team to try to combat the negative perception. Because again, this is just a YouTuber, but also, again, this has gotten almost 7 million views, and I'm sure it will only continue to grow. This is definitely like quote unquote viral. So I would be shocked if someone high up at Disney is not at least aware of this video and the discourse that's happening. So yeah, that's kind of an overview of like what's going on. I know that was kind of long, but again, I think this topic is interesting because of the implications, right? So it speaks to the impact of YouTubers, right? It continues to show how popular and influential they and their content can be, to the point where, again, like quote unquote normal people were talking about this video, right? It was kind of like a mini cultural phenomenon, notably in a way that the Star Wars Hotel was not, right? This video is going to be more important and influential than its topic, which is very disappointing, I think, if you're Disney, right? It also speaks to the idea that people like long videos on YouTube, right? Jenny has a quote in her Rolling Stone interview saying, quote, "I think a lot of people tend to be like, Gen Z doesn't have any attention span. And I think the long video essays are something you can point to as, well, they definitely can watch long stuff when they want to," end quote, right? And that just speaks to my point is like, people will pay attention if shit is good, right? I think what studios, I think, are just like, well, they don't have an attention span anymore. There's Gen Z, which they were saying about millennials, which they were saying about Gen X, which they were saying about boomers. It's just something you say about young people when they don't just accept the same slop from you anymore, right? And the final implication being, again, if my theory is true that someone high up at Disney is at least aware of this video, will it change the way Disney works, right? The biggest flaw seems to be here that this was kind of lazily and hastily put together. Not on every level, like kind of in a vacuum, different elements a lot of attention and care was put into. I don't want to say that, but kind of in a macro sense, the whole thing kind of feels semi-lazy in terms of its conception and execution. So will they try harder and do better? According to her Rolling Stone interview, Jenny is not super hopeful, and we have this quote here from her saying, quote, "Unfortunately, I think the lesson Disney is going to take is not to do weird stuff, not to try anything that's outside the box, or do any of this kind of LARP gameplay stuff again. I think the problem was more with the execution of it. I think what they should take away from it is not experimenting with charging as much as they possibly can, not paywalling stuff that they consider extras like interactive characters, gameplay, anything beyond the bare minimum for the park guests. I hope the lesson taken away is, oh, we really asked too much of our fans there. We've really tried to take advantage of them in a way that wasn't wise and didn't pan out. And we ended up losing a lot of money in the long run. But I think the takeaway will just be, we're not going to build an immersive LARP hotel again," end quote. And I think she is spot on. That I think corporations, it's like the laws of entropy in the universe. Corporations will always take the wrong lessons from successes and failures. And I think she's 100% right that I don't think they are going to take any of the right lessons from this. They're just going to go, wow, we shouldn't try anything new because people didn't like it. It's like, no, people love new shit. In fact, every old shit that they like was once new shit. So you got to just make it work and actually like put that in. And Disney World itself was new shit. People love new shit. You just have to actually like have a vision and a passion for it. It can't just be like a box to check off on your corporate to-do list.